All right, as usual, we speak on the Pasha of the week, and also as usual, primarily we speak about ourselves. There is a story of the Rebbe Maharash. Rebbe Maharash, you all know where he stands. There's the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab, his father, and his grandfather was Rebbe Maharash, the son of the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Rebbe Maharash used to travel a lot in government circles because there was a period of very bad gzeros, very bad decrees coming out of the government against the Jewish people, against the Jews in Russia. And he was very much involved personally in dealing with the ministers and all that. So the capital city then was Petersburg. So he was in Petersburg. Petersburg, like capital city, was a modern city, a wealthy city, and as a matter of fact, Jews were not even allowed to live in Petersburg. Except the exception was those who had certain trades and those who were merchants, they were permitted to live in Petersburg. So he was once in Petersburg, and a Yid that lived in Petersburg, a wealthy merchant, he came to visit him, and he brought along his son. This son was a little bit modern. He was educated. He was apparently in the high school years, and but he was also frum. I mean, he was a frum Yid. So he introduced his son, and he said that my son had learned the entire Tanya. And he said it in Yiddish. For those who know Yiddish, the Rebbe's response was like a play on the word. I'll say it later. So he said that he already learned the whole Tanya. So the Rebbe said, no. So what did the Tanya teach him? In Yiddish, it's a play on the word, because in Yiddish you say et uzgeleben im ganzen Tanya. So the Rebbe asked him, so was a Tanya atam uzgeleben? In other words, the main thing of learning Torah in general, and Hasidus in particular, is not what you teach the Torah, is what the Torah teaches you. So Pashas V'Eschanan, in this Pasha actually begins Chumash Devarim in general is a review, Moshe Rabbeinu's review of the entire Torah, of everything that was learned before. So prior to that, in Chumash Dvorim, in Seder Dvorim, was basically rebuke, was Musar, and also explaining where the Yidden were at this time. He says, we reached this point, we already conquered two nations, we already settled in their land, and now we're ready to cross the Yarden, and now I'm going to review the entire Torah with you, basically. And the Pashas V'Eschanan, this is where it begins. You already learned this Pasha, starting with the Aseres HaDibros, and he describes the entire scene, the entire experience of the Aseres HaDibros, and goes on, and then, of course, Shema Yisrael. The Pasha Shema Yisrael is in Pashas V'Eschanan. So here, Moshe Rabbeinu is reminding and explaining to us what we have actually gone through, what experiences we had, how profound and deep these experiences were. And how these experiences have such power and such profundity that they can carry us forever. And I want to speak about particularly two particular psukim. And as I mentioned all the time, that basically it's based on the Sikha from Rebbe, not necessarily one Sikha, but basically the idea is based on the Sikha from Rebbe, but then we embellish it and we try to get it closer to our own thinking. The birthday boy is looking for a spot. Come on.
Oh, yes.
Gabriel, right there. Moshe Rabbeinu says the following pasuk. This is something which is very familiar to all of us, but don't necessarily recognize the deep message that's contained in this pasuk. Ato horeis olodas ki Hashem hu holikim einoid milvado, which translated means Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Eden, the Jewish people, Ato horeis olodas, you were shown so that you can know that Hashem hu holikim, that Hashem is Elokim, and there is none other but Him. So Rashi and the Rebbe explains the inference of Rashi's comment on this pasuk. And I'm not going to go through the entire discussion in the Sikha. I just want to go to the gist of it, to the point that the expression Horeis Olodas means there are basically two ways that we can experience vision, that we see something. Excuse me? No, I really looked at it. There are two basic ways that we can see things, that sight is experienced. One way that sight is experienced is that you have an object and you show the object. See, look at this. In this case, when you're shown an object and you see it, even though you're actually seeing it, and sight, as we always discuss, sight is an extremely profound and powerful sense, more powerful than any other sense, more powerful than touch, than smell, than taste. And it's richer, it gives us a much deeper sense of of the reality of what we are seeing. Nevertheless, when it is being shown in action, and you see I'm showing you something, then the experience of sight is, even you're observing the object, but you're nevertheless observing a temporary an existent, a momentary situation. Right now, it's being shown. It's being shown, but then it could also be hidden. It can also be taken away. It's an object that exists at this moment as you are looking at it. Then there is a completely different experience of sight. Where there is no particular action done for you to see the object, for you to see anything. Where the sight relates to that which is a primary existence, a primary presence. It doesn't have to be shown. At the most that would need to be done is that you should remove all obstacles. But once you remove all blockages, anything that conceals it, then automatically you see it. In that case, this kind of sight, then what you're relating to, what you're seeing, is something which really can only be recognized through sight, because there's no object, there's nothing to describe. It is relating to something which is very fundamental, which is very real in itself. And it cannot be shown. It is something that you see automatically. Rashi on this pasuk, Ata horeis olodas, ki Hashem hu holikim, Rashi says a very interesting thing. And Rashi interprets this pasuk differently than all other Mefoshim of the Chumash. Rashi says that at a time of Matan Torah, Hashem had opened up all the Rekim, all the upper coverings, all the upper firmaments, and He broke through all the worlds, the higher worlds and the lower worlds, so that even were able to see. There was no obstruction. There was no worldly obstruction that concealed anything. And thus they were able to see directly into the entire truth itself. And when they were able to see directly the entire truth itself, then they automatically, without having to be demonstrated and shown anything, they automatically saw the fundamental and the primary truth of God's universal presence. And they saw that He was Yochid, that there was only one, there was nothing else. This is how Rashi explains this question. Now, I want to discuss this a little bit. What type of, this is clearly, I'd like you to focus and understand this. You're going a little bit beyond the surface. What does a person see when there is nothing to see? Right? We removed all obstacles. Excuse me? And how? There is no world, nothing, all worldly things, everything that was created has been broken through, and he was able to, and they saw straight through, beyond all existence. What is it to see? What kind of experience of sight is this? And yet, the Pasuk says that not only did you see, that as a result of this sight and this experience, you came to know. Ladas. Das means that you know in your mind. I'm sorry?
What does the word haresa mean?
You were shown. You were allowed to see. It says in Chassidus that the physical senses that we have, there are 5 senses. Everybody knows there are 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Now, I'd like you to understand, these 5 senses exist lahavdil by an animal too. An animal also has sight, hearing, and sometimes his smell is so acute, much more acute than that of a human being. He has all 5 senses. But there is a very big difference between the senses as they exist by a human being and the senses as they exist by an animal. By an animal, these senses are entirely on the physical level. By a human being, these senses connect to his higher and more spiritual faculties. And I want to explain this. We spoke in the past about an interesting phenomenon. A very simple thing, that we know that a horse or any animal, a horse is dropped when he gets born, and a half hour later he jumps around, runs around. A half hour later he's dropped. Boom.
He's dropped.
Huh?
How far down has he dropped?
It's how far?
How many feet does it fall?
No. It's the mother drops. It's called dropping, right? The horse comes out,
Oh, okay.
and then it, like a half hour later he gets up and starts running around. And a human baby gets born. For a human baby to reach that level of maneuverability that a horse reaches in a half hour can take more than a year. A year he first begins to stand up and start testing his way of walking around. Isn't it amazing? Does that mean that the horse is so much advanced and is so much more developed than the human being? That the human being takes a year and 2 years to be able to emulate, to copy the horse. That he does it in half an hour. Everybody understands that there's something odd about this. This is not the truth. There's no way that a horse is more advanced than a human being. No matter who it is. If even the animal lovers will say, no, that's not the case. What is the reason for that? What's behind it? The reason for that is that, I know you heard it, I just want to go through this whole thing. The reason for that is that for a human being to use his physical faculties, like we said, the senses, he first has to develop his inner faculties, his intellect, and his emotions. He cannot use his feet unless intellectually it has been processed that the whole idea of walking, the whole idea of touch and smell. A horse, he doesn't need to process it intellectually. A horse, as the saying is, he walks because he has feet. A human being walks because he understands and he projects what walking is in his intellect. It's an intellectual process. So that by the time the baby begins to stand up, and trying to walk, he has processed, he has grown so much intellectually and emotionally, so that now he is able to relate intellectually to walking and to standing up. And he knows what it means. He wants to stand up. He doesn't want to crawl on the ground. He wants to stand up because he realizes standing up is more intellectual, more human, more significant. What does this show us? This is an important phenomenon. It shows us that even though we have the same faculties we have with the animals, but by us they function totally differently. They're under totally different control and direction system. And just to expand on this a little further, we see, yes, indeed, the horse starts walking a half hour after it's born. And it takes years for a human being to reach that point. But when the human being reaches that point, he can do, with his walking with his feet, very sophisticated maneuvers. He doesn't just walk just in a certain way. He can dance, he can create all kinds of sophisticated and very, very intricate movements. Because by him, it's all controlled with his brain and with his emotion. It's not controlled by his feet. It's a completely different thing, completely different experience. This is true, as an example, we have illustrated this in the feet, but this is absolutely true on every level. Every one of our external physical faculties, like I said, the senses of all the five senses, in a human being are related, and they're under the inspiration and control of the higher faculties, of the intellect and the emotion. So that sight, generally speaking, sight is related to the intellect, to Chokhmah. In the intellect itself, the highest element of the intellect, that's called Chokhmah. And hearing is related to Bina. I'm sure most of you heard Chokhmah and Bina. And without this Chokhmah, and without the Bina, he would not have that type of experience in sight or hearing. He would not have the same experience at all. So that we see and Lahavu the animal sees. And what we see, what the animal sees, are worlds apart, totally different visuals, totally different experiences. In the past, when we try to explain the difference, we said something like this. The animal, whatever object it sees it from the perspective of what it means to it. When it sees an object, the question is very simple. Who is going to be whose lunch? Is he going to be my lunch, or am I going to be his lunch? It's an entirely on a physical level, on a physical and spiritual level, on a personal level. There's no other absolute objective value in what it sees. Whereas a human being, he sees things on a completely different level, on an objective level. Why? Because sight connects to his chokhmah. And in chokhmah, which is a higher faculty coming straight from his soul, from his life force, and therefore there in chokhmah he perceives life, the truth, at the level of life itself, and therefore he sees things at that level, at the level of life, at the level of reality itself. It's a completely different experience. Clearly, we have to limit this discussion, because I want to focus on the Indian, but I think what we said is sufficient to recognize this important principle. Number one, that the senses as used by the human being are totally different than those of the same senses used by the animal. And the difference is that by a human being, these senses are controlled and interpreted by the higher faculties, which are directly emanating, everybody knows what it means, directly coming from and representing his soul, his human soul, or his godly soul. And therefore, his experience of sight and experience of hearing and touch and smell, they all relate to the higher faculties. And they have a completed, they have an element of profound truth in them. As a parenthetical comment, I don't want to go there too deeply, but I just want to parenthetically insert this. This gives us a sense and understanding why it is so important, it is absolutely imperative that a person guard his eyes, what he allows himself to see, and what he allows himself to look at, and what he doesn't, and what he protects his eyes from. Because it's not just the physical eyes. The eyes are a window into his chokhmah, and the chokhmah is a window into his nefesh, into his soul. And if a person allows his eyes to observe things which are detrimental to his spiritual health, he draws his nefesh into it. And it actually, Shalom, can cause him to become a spiritual cripple. So this is very important, as I said in parenthetical comment, to understand what is happening to us as we are functioning normally. Yes.
Is this true only by sight or by the other senses as well?
By all the senses. Sight is more significant than the others because it is more spiritual, more refined, and therefore it touches the person more deeply. It touches his chokhmah, and chokhmah, since you asked, chokhmah touches his oinik, and oinik is the very soul itself. Excuse me? What?
What about intuition? What kind of
Intuition?
Yes.
Okay. Some other time. I'm sorry. I have an agenda.
Okay.
I just took off a little detour because it's an important point. It's an important point. I am still right now under the influence of an experience that I had. I was talking to a bocher, who was born and bred in a kosher home. And he is a kosher bocher, and he is everything. He's a good bocher. He's learning and davening with alle Sachen. And he's 25 years old. We were talking about what he should do. So there was a suggestion that he should become a sheikh or a sefer. So he says, yes, maybe, but I don't feel I have the Yiras Shamayim necessary. Yiras Shamayim, fear of heaven, because it's challenging when things are not so perfectly. You have to come out and say it's no good, even though it's going to be a monetary loss. You have to be very honest. For that, you need to be a Yiras Shamayim. And he says, I don't feel I have that Yiras Shamayim. And I was very shocked, and I told him, look, listen to him, because this bocher was never exposed to what he shouldn't be exposed to. I said to him, you understand what happened over here? From the cradle, you grew up with Yiras Shamayim. You were born to a kosher home. From the cradle, you only heard Abbas Hashem, Abbas HaTorah, Yiras Hashem. That's what you grew up with. And then you went through so many years of chinuch in the yeshivas, and you learn, and you daven, you do all of them. How come you don't? What happened to Yiras Shamayim? How come? What happened to it? It's very simple. It's tragic, as simple. When you get exposed to what you should not be exposed to, the sight, your reality changes. He's still Yiras Shamayim. He doesn't want to do it because he's afraid he's not going to be Yiras Shamayim. He still has a Yiras Shamayim. But his reality, his sense of reality changed. Because all the Chochmah has been touched and the sense of reality changed. So whenever I think of that episode, I'm saying it's a shadow. We have to understand how serious and how, as I said, it could be spiritually crippling. But the sense of reality changes. Because reality for a person, a human being, reality is not what he touches, and not what he smells, and not what he eats. Reality is processed by his chokhmah. What he perceives in his chokhmah, and if his chokhmah has been damaged, then the reality changes, not in connection, in contact with his reality. Okay, again, I just took a little detour. So, when it says in the Pasuk, Ato horeisa lodas, you were shown, what is there to see? If you take away all the creation, all created obstacles, what is there to see? The answer is, you see that which your neshama sees. This is what the Pasuk says. You were shown, and you were elevated, you were brought out to see purely with your pure eyes. You saw it. But what did you see? That which your neshama sees. That which your soul sees. And when you see that which your soul sees, then from that can come and results in the das. because this is such a clear and pure vision that ultimately that becomes your das. We spoke about what das is. Das is a so to speak, a whole seder all on its own. But primarily, das is what is the reality that you relate to. What is real? And this is why Moshe Rabbeinu says, saying to the, you were exposed to seeing this inyan Havayahu Elikim, that Hashem Hu Elikim Ein Noid, there is none other. You were actually exposed to see it the way the soul sees it, in its purity. And therefore you were given the opportunity to actually know this very, very clearly. And I want to connect this and show how this is interpreted later on in the same passion, and how this actually trickles down, comes down to us on a practical level. Later on in this passion is the passion of Shema Yisrael. Everybody knows Shema Yisrael, right? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Everybody knows it. And that also we discussed many times. And now, in context of this pasha, I want to discuss it again. The principal union of Shema Yisrael is to recognize that Hashem Echad, that there is only one truth. There's only one truth. And perhaps more importantly, the way to phrase it, that this one truth is the basis for all existence. In other words, all existence is actually representative of this one truth. Because Echad, the word Echad is composed of 3 letters. Aleph, Ches, Dalet. I don't know if you learned this, but the principal union in Echad, and when you say Hashem Echad, you have to have the kavanah, you have to think. And what do you have to think? You have to think that Hashem is one in all of space, up and down, and in all 4 corners. That's the kavanah, that's the thought that has to go through your mind when you say Hashem Echad. And I always ask the question, if you have to think that Hashem is one in all of space, up and down, in all 4 corners, all 4 directions, why do we cover our eyes and close our vision? We should open our eyes and look up and down and look in all 4 sides and say Hashem Echad. Why are we covering our eyes? When you cover our eyes, we don't see up and down. We don't see in all 4 directions. I'm sorry? But we say you have to go up and down in all 4 directions. I'm sorry? Yeah.
Here, it's not to see. It's to hear. Why should we look up and down in all 4 directions?
Because that's what Hashem Echad. The word Echad is explained in Shulchan Aruch and explained in the Meforshim. Echad means Aleph, Ches, Down. The Ches refers to up and down. There's 7 heavens, 7 Rekim, and the earth. And Dalet is 4 numerically, which means the four sides, 4 directions: east, west, north, and south. So when you have your eyes closed, there's no dimensions, no up and down. What is the secret behind this performance, this act, and this kavanah? This is what we said before. That sight by us is not just merely physical. On the contrary, the physical sight, if it were just left to the physical sight, they would see the same thing, lahavdil, what the animal sees. But we see totally differently. The sight of space, this is, so to speak, seeing all of existence. And that we have, that we recognize with our eyes closed. I'm sorry? That we recognize with our eyes closed. How do we recognize it with our eyes closed? Because we see with our soul. We see with our chokhmah. We don't need to open our eyes to know that there is reality. We know reality in our chokhmah. With closed eyes we know that there is reality. We're not lahadu animals. We have a living soul with intellect. This intellect, this is what tells us what the reality is, not our physical eyes. On the contrary, our physical eyes connect to that inner sight. This is the reality that we live in. And the principle of this Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad is to recognize, in fact, that all of existence, which is basically defined in this all dimensions of space, up and down in every direction, all of existence is really one. Is the Aleph. Aleph means one. And as I pointed out before, that the important element in this vision, in this kavanah, is not just that there is only one God. Okay, this is what the Rebbe says. Who is looking for a God soaking in the water, like the Shemayim Imar Ba'oris Mitochas, beneath the earth. The important thing for us is to recognize this principle, the following. This is what we spoke about, Ato Resel Das, and this is the principle of Hashem Echad. The Shema Yisrael and Ato Resel Das is aimed to give us a perspective of what the world is about. What is the truth that we are observing in the world? Because with our physical observation, and as I said, it's possible that we do not connect to the Chokhmah and we see the same world that the animal sees. And the Rebbe taught us and lifted us in that time. We should see a different world. We should see a world that our soul sees. What kind of world does our soul see? Our soul sees a world that is fundamentally representing godliness, truth, value. Not a world that runs around aimlessly, without purpose, without meaning. Just enjoy yourself. Anything that's enjoyable, that's what life is about. That's not what the soul sees. That's what the animal sees. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu taught you. Shema Yisrael, you have to understand and remember that Hashem Echad, that the entire universe and everything that you see, you have to understand what it is that you're observing. You're seeing it not with your physical eyes, you're seeing it with your spiritual eyes. It has a true and a godly meaning, a godly presence. So this is the pastor of the week. These two psukim which are correlated, as we pointed out, and the principle that the Eibusher actually, Hashem gave us these faculties through which we're able to connect to our intellect, through which we can able to connect to our soul, and thus actually recognize godliness in our physical world. So, to take this back, as I said, we're talking about ourselves. There is a demand coming from this psukim and coming from the Torah that we raise our perspective, raise the significance of what we see and what we experience. That what we see in the world, we have to think back and say, is this here just because it's here? Or is there a godly element behind it? In everything that we experience, everything that we pursue, there has to be some kind of underlying value. When you start pursuing things without underlying value, just because of they exist, just because they are there, just the physical, just the taste, just the smell, then we are not using our faculties the way they are meant to be used, even our physical faculties. This would be tantamount, would be on par, as if to say that a human being walks around just the way a horse walks around. Would anybody accept that type of compliment? You know, you walk like a horse. It's wonderful. It's horrible. We always point out when it comes to walking, and this is true regarding every faculty, every activity of a human being, is all illustrative of his soul. But just one little thing. We spoke about walking. Everybody knows that there's something extremely unique and wondrous of the way a human being walks in comparison to everything, to all other animals. Every animal walks, generally speaking, on four legs, and it's supported on all sides, so that the animal has, so to speak, physically a logical way that it's supported, just like the table. The table stands on four legs. You put the table on two legs, what's going to happen to it? It's going to collapse. It's not going to stand. The human being, he does not stand on four, he stands on two. And he stands up erect on two legs. It's a wondrous thing. How does he do that? And he stands firmly, very firmly. He can, as I said, perform all kinds of exquisite movements with these two legs, on one leg, on the tips of his finger and of his toes. How does that happen? What is the answer? What is the answer? The answer is that a human being is not supported by his legs like the animal is, like the table is. He is supported, held up by his brain. It's his brain that keeps him afloat and that keeps him in balance. And the legs is just that he is also touching the ground. A human being is primarily a soul and a spiritual element. And that spiritual element is also acting in the physical world. So, in conclusion, here in Yeshiva, Baruch Hashem is sitting here a whole day and learning Torah. And sometimes you're learning things that looking from a physical and worldly perspective, you don't know how to put it. It doesn't make sense. It's not worldly. And you are in the world. You're trying to put it in a worldly context. Please understand, it's not meant to be in a worldly context. And you know something? You are able, and you're given that capability to see things from a higher perspective, and see things from the perspective of the soul, not from a worldly perspective. And all the Torah that you learn is all really founded in godliness and in the soul rather than in the physical world. And we were granted, we were given this gift at Mount Sinai, at Kabbalah Torah, that we were able to see that and to experience that which the soul sees. And since then, this became our reality. So even though we were exposed to the world and we are what's called Bali Tshuva and so forth, but we have to remember, with all the exposure, that fundamental truth has not changed. We just have to reach to it. But that fundamental truth has not changed. And if we keep ourselves focused, and you guard our eyes, and you guard our ears, and you guard our all other faculties from where they should not be contaminated, with God's help, we can reconnect and bring out the faculties of the soul, the true faculties of the soul, the true view like a human being sees things. Like we were shown, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, we were shown the truth to see it straight out. Without obstacles, we don't have to be shown, we just see it, because our soul sees it. And that sight is with us till this very day. So the Rebbe should help to bless each one of us, each one of you, be successful to whatever kind you have here, to connect to that soul truth that we were all exposed to at Mount Sinai.
Amen.
And as I mention all the time, this is just like what we saw on the Har Sinai, carries that for thousands of years. This is sufficient to carry us through our lifetime. Remember, Hatzlacha.
Right.